What's going on? 6-4, June 4th. Shout out Easy E. This is the 21st episode of In the M with MC. Thank y'all for rocking with us. We have a lot to talk about on the show today. A lot of different topics, ranging across different sports. Some things that have just been lingering, but also, some of the what's what in news recently. Let's start with something stable that we can all follow. Okay, the NBA Finals. We have two teams. The Oklahoma City Thunder, who have not been back to the finals since Kevin Durant and co took them in 2011 or 12 when they lost to the Miami Heat. And the Indiana Pacers, who have not been back since the year 2000. Um, and I think I can't remember who they beat that year um to get there, but I just do remember that, you know, Reggie Miller, who's really always associated with the Pacers, he's a guy that would die for them to win a championship. And he took a lot of flack on social media because of the way he acted on the broadcast. He was very clearly had a dog in the fight and couldn't even act impartial even for 2 seconds. I thought that was very telling about Mr. Miller, and his ability to be objective, but also like how hard that is for people who are so emotionally invested. And maybe one of the reasons that you don't always need these former players to be involved in these ways. Give people opportunities. Some of the best broadcasters, Ian Eagle, Noah Eagle, um, Mark Davis, I don't believe played professional. I could be wrong. Um, and whatever the guy's name is for the Hornets, I can't remember his name right now. Eric Collins. I don't think any of those guys play pro. I think they all are broadcasters through and through, and their ability to bring life to the sport while maintaining objectivity. Maybe Reggie Miller could uh get a thing or two out of their book. But the point is, the finals is set. These are really young teams. Something that's really on the front of my mind is how are these young guys going to handle whatever pressures associated with this moment? This is a huge moment. And right now, the moment has not seemed too big for either one of these teams in a very rare kind of way. Think about SGA's performance, the steadiness of his performance throughout the Western Conference Finals, having support from J-Dub, having support from different players on the team, the defensive prowess that they're able to play with. Anthony Edwards said it's like 15 dudes on one string. And I think that they're overwhelmingly favored. I don't like y'all know, I don't looking at it Vegas stuff. I don't know what Vegas is talking about, but I do think that they're overwhelmingly favored because why wouldn't they be? They're so much better on paper. They've shown us that they're so much better. They have the MVP on their team. And I think if you're Halliburton, the Heat finals, not the Heat, the Laker finals that they won recently in 2020 during the bubble, that finals really gave Jimmy Butler a lot of the credit that he's now still reaping, both at the bank and in the court of public opinion. That's really how he one of the reasons he became this playoff Jimmy archetype. I was never buying the playoff Jimmy Kool-Aid. I think that stuff's fizzled out. I think that next year there's no shot that if they make the playoffs, uh, that he can be the guy to elevate them to wherever. I think I was gonna have to come from Kaminga or somebody taking Pods' role in the rotation and really doing something with it because Pods is just so up and down, but he's a player with a ceiling. And I think that they just need a couple of guys who don't have ceilings. Jordan Poole was a guy who didn't have a ceiling, and now he's getting meaningless buckets for the worst team in the league. They everything could be coming up soon for them. Bub Carrington's really good. Um, they they had a surge at the end of the season, so there could be something there for the Wizards. But back to the finals itself, one of the biggest matchups is going to be Pascal Siakam versus Chet Holmgren. Miles Turner and Hartenstein, I think that is also a matchup to watch, but those guys will be primarily matched up with each other, which means then you have Pascal and Chet on both sides, long wingspan dudes, rangy kind of guys. How are they going to play against each other? How are they going to play off each other? How are the coaches possibly going to use actions that involve either of them when the other one is doing whatever they're doing respectively, right? Chet can go 30 minutes without having a play design for him, but Pascal is going to be pretty involved in the offense. Um, and he'll hope, especially if he gets an opportunity to hit that spin move situation that he loves to do. If you're Chet, you've seen the spin move situation. Chet Holmgren is one of the best defenders in the universe from an instinct perspective. I think I'm confident that this was something that, this is something that's instilled in him. But for me, and I'm not sure if I've talked about this before on here, but I've certainly talked about this on the Polar podcast. When he played against Sierra Canyon, when Minnehaha Academy played against Sierra Canyon, and he had a triple double with blocks, he was getting to it. He was getting to it, and it was really special, obviously because of the frame. But again, the instincts are there. The second jump is there. The help is there. The verticality is there. Using what he has, using his intangibles. The series is going to be interesting. If I had to pick it one way, I would say OKC in five. I don't think the Pacers get more than one game out of this. But again, thinking about rising to the moment and meeting the moment, you guys are the only show on TV from the playoff perspective now, right? There are tons of other leagues that are still active, but you guys are the only show on TV from the playoff perspective, which means you get all the news headlines from game to game, the the way that your home crowd could sour on you versus these writers who could sour on you, and so on and so on. All of these things matter. And I think that the way that the younger guys do or don't let these things affect them, it matters. It's funny because these are considered small market teams, but something that's really, really funny to me is that these are not areas where players are going and then partying and then playing games. The Indiana players aren't going to OKC and then they have 2 days, and the first day they party and the second day they play. It's not gonna happen. This is not like a Miami Heat series versus LA, Miami, LA, like what them dudes is up to in their off time, even during the series. And they'll tell you otherwise, but come on, like, you know, um, shout out to both of their coaches who got there in their various ways. Really thinking about Rick Carlisle having just coached in the finals last year. I feel like there's not enough people talking about that. He just coached in the finals. Um, Let me pause. Shout out to Rick Carlisle bringing the Indiana Pacers to the finals. The Mavericks were just in the finals, and he had a lot to do with that, right? But he wasn't, their guy, and that's okay. But now he's here. Now he's here with the Indiana Pacers, and he's getting the most out of a lot of these players. The schemes look great, the adjustments look great. He really had Tom Thibodeau in a blender, so much so that he lost his job. We're gonna get to Thibs, but he's lower down in the docket. That really previews the final series. Like I said, it's gonna be OKC's game to lose. But it'll be interesting to see who steps up for the Pacers. Will it be Nebhard? Will it be Siakam even more? Right? He has that radar on him because he was named the MVP of the series. But is he gonna go to a different place during this series to possibly cement himself? Players who have won championships with two different teams, especially at the age he is, the way that it's being done, unconventional guy, takes a lot of crap. Good dude though. So shout out Pascal. Gonna shift gears to some very daunting news. Jonathan Brenkus, who used to run sports science at ESPN, he actually founded the company and sold the company and ran all the stuff for the company. And he spoke about on Marcellus Wiley's show his battle with depression, his battle with suicide, ideation, and he lost the battle. John left. He took his own life, and it just there's some things that you see these notifications on your phone, especially nowadays when it's death. When we're overloaded with these deaths. You scroll on X, you refresh on X, you refresh on Instagram, you tap through Instagram, and there's these deaths. This heaviness. Um, if anybody out there has never really uh, been in a situation with this kind of thing being rampant and prevalent and real, it is real. It is not. It's not a ghost. It's not a werewolf. It's not a vampire. Like there are lots of people out there who struggle with mental health in the way of Jonathan Brenkus, in the way of a Robin Williams, in the way of an Anthony Bourdain. Just to think of some. larger than life figurehead characters who are still being impersonated with all the love. You know, everyone has these impressions of these people who made us laugh and who brought smiles to our faces and in our homes, who brought so much light to us. But internally, these people had no light, or their light was dimmed, or their light was frayed to the point of literal death, to the point of self-destruction. And it's daunting and it's terrible and it's horrible. It's horrific. And rest in peace to Jonathan Brenkus and everybody closely associated to him. You know, my condolences are with them. But just to think about how much impact he had working with ESPN, doing his sports science, it it opened the door for what people now just call analytics. They throw their hands up and go, these analytic guys. He helped open the door and establish legitimacy for these analytic guys. He helped predict the success of so many quarterbacks like Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. He helped us understand how crazy it is for Adrian Peterson and Marshawn Lynch to be who they are. And from every person that seemed to have crossed paths with him, from a player perspective at least, he seemed like a stand-up 15 out of 10 guy. So it's truly heartbreaking. Truly heartbreaking. I'm gonna criticize for a second here. PTI just ended on not PTI, or maybe Around the Horn. One of them shows ended on ESPN. I don't care what show it is. The point is that the style of show on ESPN is dry. I think that the issue is that ESPN is only looking at ratings and they think it's all about personalities and entertainment's the bottom line, and the bottom line is the bottom line. Sure, whatever. I'm with you, right? I'm rocking with you. Does that mean that I would have given out those contracts to Stephen A. Smith and Pat McAfee? No, because they have a top heavy roster. All right. So that's where they struggle with, quote unquote, bringing in talent. I think that they don't have the capacity to pay the people who would truly make their shows better from an on camera perspective. So they bring in a lot of these older players who are just looking to get their foot in the door somewhere. Hey, I got some spots on ESPN. Look at me talk. And certain guys made it look easy for other guys, like Gilbert Arenas. For as off kilter as that guy is, he's very good at talking about basketball. He's very comfortable on camera, and he in the first couple times he just showed up on TV and did it. Everyone was like, "Man, like this is really easy." JJ Redick, he did the same thing. But JJ Redick ended up doing what? Now he's coaching the Los Angeles Lakers. Some people are more equipped for what they're doing than they lead on, because then you have this is not basketball but football, but you have a guy like Cam Newton who doesn't understand how he's not a journalist. As if journalism is not a field of study, Oh, I've done this in front of the camera. I'm good at this. I can interview people. I have a podcast. You're not a journalist, you know. At least not by trade, right? You might be involved in something that you consider journalism. Your podcast might be underneath the journalism category. That is great, but you're not a journalist. You don't have the skills of a journalist. So, from First Take's perspective, I think that they need more people who are highly informed on what they're discussing. But then the whole, this one moderator and Stephen A just rants and these other people just chime in, and the hot takeness of it all, it's just gross. Like, how can these people live with themselves? Truly. I mean, Stephen A, I don't want to get into all the stuff he was talking about today, just today alone on First Take, but so much of it is just not the game. It's not the sports. It's not what people turn on the TV, the sports channels to listen to. It's just not that. And it's gross. You have Kendrick Perkins calling out Anthony Edwards' personal life situation from a familial standpoint, right? And morality is just so sketchy in the public eye because, you mentioned somebody's mom. It's like, well, he mentioned my mom, so yeah, know I had to do it to him. And then whatever you do next is 1000% justified, but it's always so left field. It's always the most drastic thing you can imagine being the next step. And that person is like, yeah, I'm justified because you talked about my mom. Okay. So using your logic, right? Why can you then talk about these people's families or these people's significant others or whoever else, whatever have you? And then from a professional perspective, you even think about the LeBron James stuff, right? Like they were acting like there were these landmines that they couldn't talk about with Bronny James, which is not the case. The imaginates of said landmines created the landmines, created the tension, and exacerbated the tension in ways that didn't have to happen. And I'm sure for behind, closed doors, I think Stephen A is probably just like at this point, just like the double agent. Like he'll do one thing on camera, act like he wants to do something else. But behind closed doors, he's having these upper level meetings. He feels like he's the guy. And he's looking at them numbers. He's like, hey, I'm bringing in these numbers. Look at me. I told you this would work, that kind of thing. A person that they frequently have on First Take who is slowly falling out of favor for me is a sports journalist. It's really an analyst, right? It's Ryan Clark. Ryan Clark got into a big thing with RG3. It's not really about that though. It's about his style of sports journalism, having these highly produced, highly manufactured snippets. Like you're creating your clips, you know, with the highest 70 camera lens you can imagine, and you're just rotating around the room under the guise of we're the pivot and it's us men and we're having these conversations, but it's mostly him for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes just talking and stroking his ego and just listening to himself speak. And I have to, when I listen to Ryan Clark, I'm always like, where are these thoughts coming from? Do you read when's the last time you read a book? When is the last time you sat down and read a book? Because a lot of these dudes, um, you can talk football, you can talk basketball, you can talk baseball, like you can talk hockey. That's awesome. But the analytical aspect of the games, right? When you think about that, like what it takes to be an analyst and what it takes to be in front of a camera and have access to these audiences, you have to have reference points. You have to have the ability to create and understand illusion. You have to have basis, and that comes from reading. And I'm always listening to Ryan Clark, like, man, when is the last time this cat read a book? Only thing I'll say about him too, I said a lot about him, but the last thing I'll say about him is, sports journalism as a profession for years, right? It has been segregated like any other profession. And we've now reached a point where somebody like Stephen A is one of the highest paid, if not the highest paid guy on TV talking about sports. He's a black guy. Went to HBCU, but he'll be the first to tell you that he didn't just get there, right? He 20 years at the Philadelphia Inquirer. There are numerous black newspapers that have existed and continue to exist. I'm not sure if a lot of people out there know that, right? And these newspapers, you gave black journalists opportunities to publish stories about sports and gave coverage to African American related sports stories. Um, and I say all that to say that, you know, these people are on TV and they're being paid handsomely to talk about sports. That's great. But there's room for everybody. There's probably somebody right now covering sports for the Chicago Defender who wants to go somewhere else. Like, and that's obviously no shade to the defender, but that's saying talking about again, like everyone thinking that there's room or space for them in the room. And Ryan Clark's like, oh, I want to be the next Stephen A. And I've seen him talk about this rivalry, this fake rivalry, because he he's an alpha male and he's coming for it. Man, shut up. Like, what are you talking about? There's room for everybody. Lift as you climb, network across. And because a lot of these dudes they don't have the foundations coming from the books or coming from the classes or coming from wherever, they lose sight of that concept. Brian Clark woke up one day and was like, I want to continue this, being this football guy. And these are the ways I'm gonna do it. Starting with being on NFL Network a lot and then turning into the pivot and I am athlete. That's great. But how much have you grown along the way at this thing that you consider to be a sacred profession? You know, that's all I ask. Um, I'll just might as well talk about this since it's football, and we'll end on talking about Thibs a little bit. Frank Ragnow retired for the Detroit Lions, their center. It was really a shame to see that happen. NFL stands for not for long. Chris Borland. I mean, it's tons of guys when you just think about who really played a lot less seasons than you think because of the physical toll. Guys who played more seasons than that, who talk about the car crash aspect of playing in the league and the turnaround time and the Toradol and the pain and the suffering and crying and emotional fits. I mean, these dudes are going through it. And peace be with Ragno. It always sucks to see the takes where people say, "Oh, well, this person's really good," but and then they continue after that. Anything after that is selfish. You see it a lot with Andrew Luck. People always are like, "Yeah, I respect his decision," but and then they always talk about, "Well, he could have done this, and he was the most cerebral, and he." That defeats the purpose. You think he don't want to go out there and play? These men are broken. They are breaking down. And you think, oh man, well, my comment on Twitter about how this person could have got more years out of their joint, like they really need to see that. Like that comment really needs to exist in the lexicon. What a shame. Ragnow is a standout for the Lions. Lions are my favorite offensive line to watch in the league. It'll be interesting to see how they rebound without Ben Johnson and without Ragnow going into the next year. But I'm pretty sure they'll be fine. They have like 30 wins over the last 2 seasons. Shout out to the Detroit Lions. Tom Thibodeau being fired to me is a joke. 4 out of the last 5 seasons, they made the playoffs. The East takes a lot of flack, but when you really think about it, the East had the Celtics as a champion, right? They had the Bucks as a champion, and these are in recent years. That Heat team that lost 5 years ago to the Lakers was completely stacked, absolutely stacked, top to bottom. Um, so in an East that I wouldn't really consider quote unquote deep, but I would say is respectable. 4 out of the last 5 years, the Knicks have made the playoffs, made the conference finals. Tom Thibodeau was one coach of the year. And to me, it's like in the NBA, everything takes time, but the collective bargaining agreement and the impatience of fan bases and the impatience of owners and ownership has really eradicated what we know or thought we knew as the NBA timeline to try to win something. Whatever that timeline used to be, it no longer exists. And it's a copycat league. I've talked about this a couple episodes ago. So now you're going to have the Thunder win or the Pacers win, both of which really in the form that their roster is currently in, like I said, are made up of young guys but started with a trade for a cornerstone and then looked like a bunch of drafting and trading. You got Shea, you got Halliburton, and then a lot of drafting and trading, keeping a couple of the pieces you had. Miles Turner in the case of Indiana. Um, OKC really didn't keep nobody. Um, maybe like I think Isaiah Joe might have been on the team for no. Yeah, they didn't really keep nobody. But but okay, it's a copycat league. So whoever wins the league in what looks like this fashion of we're a young team based around a blockbuster guy and a bunch of other guys, that's what everyone else is gonna do. The New York Knicks right now don't have enough offensive output for what is required in the league. Bridges is up and down. OG was up and down. You know what you're gonna get out of Cat and Brunson, and that's why I don't think that either one of them should be the scapegoat guy. But I do think that they need to run an offense that's more fluid. Brunson be 17 seconds, 16 seconds of the shot clock. And I saw Jeff Teague talk about that. And I low-key thought he was hating, but I watched the game, had to be the game before their final game of that series. So game 5. We watched that game. I was some friends and we watched it, and I was just disgusted at watching Brunson just boom, 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 pound the hell out of the rock all the time. He's got to do something about that. But for Thibs to be the scapegoat here, it just doesn't sit right with me. I think that he hasn't had enough time with some of the rosters that he's been given. Should he have gone deeper into the team? Yeah, but look at what it looks like when you go deeper into the team. That's what I'll say if I'm him. Why is Landry Shamet my 7 man? I'm sorry. Landry Shamet's a good player, and he has stretches, and people become these like cult players, these fan favorites. There's a reason Shamet been on all of them teams. Why is he my 7, 8, or even 8 guy? Like Landry Shamet is a 9 guy on a lot of teams, barely cracking the rotation. 9, 10 guy. Why is he my 7, 8 guy? You know, Mitchell Robinson wasn't healthy for a lot of the season. Definitely impacted the ability of the team to play the defense that they wanted. But all in all, I really, really don't like him as a scapegoat. I hope that they can get back to where they want to get to, because if not, Cat is gone. The whole team is gone. A lot of people don't understand Cat is on their team because the Timberwolves could not afford him. It was going to be Cat or it was going to be Ant. You get one guy in that super triple quadruple max situation. Nas Reed is making more money now because of good play, and it's like, hey, you played well. but as a team, we can barely pay you because if you're all entitled to this percentage of the cap after a while, we have no more percentages of the cap to give. So Cat is on the Knicks because the Timberwolves couldn't afford him, which is ironic because he probably would have made more money if he had the same contract he used to have on the Timberwolves, like after tax, versus whatever he had his new contract would be with the Knicks after tax, because it's New York. Um, but yeah, that's the episode today. Good rundown. 21, June 4th, we are gone.